I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and happy Thanksgiving! Today is Black Friday, and I'm going to be dyeing up a very special colorway that is a part of a very fun bundle in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop, where you can buy a skein of this colorway and get a second mystery skein of yarn for just $10. I'll talk more about this deal and all of the other special Black Friday bundles, mystery offerings in the end of the video, but some of them did just go live just as this video aired. And so if you want to pause or pull up the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop as you're watching, I'll have links to the shop down in the video description. Today, I want to dye a speckled yarn, and I was really thinking about a teal and wanting to incorporate that into my project. And the Paradise Fibers acid dye green, which is really more teal, kept popping into my head. So I decided to go through my Paradise Fibers acid dye collection, and I pulled the orange, the brown, the green, which is more teal, and then the turquoise to be our palette today. The other thing I needed to do before we get started was to pull the yarn bases I want to dye today. And there's a few different yarn bases that I wanted to dye that range from fingering weight all the way to bulky. We have KnitPicks Stroll Fingering Weight yarn, which is 75% Superwash Merino, 25% Nylon. KnitPicks Swish DK and Twill Worsted, which are both 100% Superwash Merino wool. We have KnitPicks Chroma Twist Bulky, which is 70% superwash wool, 30% nylon. And then I have a worsted weight Dyer Supplier yarn that's 100% superwash merino. That yarn base has been discontinued, so there's only going to be one of those available. But if you want to learn more about any of the KnitPicks yarn bases, I am a KnitPicks affiliate. I will have my affiliate links down in the video description. And through December 1st, you can save 30% off your order with the coupon code 11BlackFriday25. I'll have my affiliate link to KnitPicks down in the video description and those details as well. And now let's go ahead and prep our dyes so we can start speckling. I put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves to mix our dye powder with some citric acid. I will have an affiliate link to the spice jars that I'm using down in the video description. I started using my funnel to add 2 tablespoons of citric acid powder to each of the jars. Using the funnel meant that I had a lot less fallout over my counter and therefore wasn't trying to pour directly from the spoon. When it came to the dyes, into one jar I added 2 teaspoons of the dye powder to the 2 tablespoons of citric acid. With the green and brown I also did 2 teaspoons of dye powder, but with the turquoise I only did 1 teaspoon of the dye just because it looked like it was going to be very pigmented. Now the pigments mixed with the citric acid, the green is looking the lightest right now. So depending on how things go with the first skein I dye, we may go and add more powder into the container. But it also could be because with that green, the consistency of the powder was much finer, less clumped. So it could just be looking different the way it is sort of around the citric acid. And I know I showed you some swatches in the intro, but here are some of the powders that were on those measuring spoons. We've got the green, which as promised is more of a teal, the orange, the turquoise, and the brown. And how we play around with the proportions of them, I think is gonna have a fair amount of variability, but I'm excited to play around with this palette. All of our prototype yarn bases that I showed you in the intro have pre-soaked for a little over an hour. Now I'm going to add some white vinegar in here too. 3, 4, 5, sure. 5 tablespoons in a basin full of water. Now we do have citric acid mixed in with the dyes, which will add some of that acid that you need for the dyes to bind to the yarn. And I actually have not yet added any acid into our yarn mop. That will get acid from the leftover citric acid that's in things. It's still handy to have acid in the yarn already if you're hoping to get some sharper speckles. But what we're going for today is going to be on the heavier side of sharp speckles, because rather than using my fingers to pinch the dye and slowly, slowly apply it to the yarn, I'm going to be tapping it more. And some places it might be a little bit, some places might be more heavy. We'll see what the colors, quote, want to do and go from there. I'm going to speckle on 100 grams of yarn at a time. And I think I'm going to put it inside this catering steam pan while I do the countertop speckles. This will just help contain, like the walls of this will contain any fallout from the spice jars rather than it potentially rolling off the counter. It'll stay more contained in here and make the cleanup a little bit easier. But if I wanted to speckle on more skeins at once, I could lay them all out on the countertop. You've seen me do that before. We're going to start on the twill worsted weight yarn, and I am going to just quickly spread it out so that way you can see why we're only going to do one at a time. Because this gives me a lot more access to surface area of the yarn, and I can do pretty much dye one side, flip it, dye the other, boom, grab the next yarn and continue. But now I'm going to go put on my Deluxe Rubber Respirator mask, and I'm already wearing my gloves and safety glasses so we can jump in. Okay, let's start with the green because this is the color I want to make sure is pigmented enough. And I'm sprinkling it on kind of like you would, oh, that was a little heavy, sanding sugar or something. Okay, let's do the orange. Oh, funny. So the orange is definitely coming out a little bit more clumpy. I think that the texture of the dyes, you could see the top. Oh, no, the top is very clogged with some powder. I don't know if you could see. Okay, it was definitely clogged with powder from when I shook things up. Okay, that orange is packing a punch. More of a punch than the green. But that also could be because it was clogged. Let's see. Okay, the turquoise is not clogged. Ooh, this one's coming out nice and slow, which is good. But see, we're going for like not something, we don't want the colorway to feel mostly white. Aha, this one did the same thing. There we go, that took care of that. I feel like I want a lot of brown. I like for Black Friday having a very like fall feeling colorway. And so this, you know, packs a punch. We have a little bit of the colors all over, a lot of it maybe. Okay, and now I'm gonna flip it, spread out the other side, trying my best to expose white areas, and then carry on. And I'm going pretty heavy with that green. In theory, if I'm going to take a break, I should cover the lids of the various containers. Oh, I'm going a little too heavy, maybe, for some of these. Went a little heavy-handed. Now a little more blue down there. But I'm having fun. And isn't that the whole entire point? Okay. Now I'm going to take this yarn and set it aside. I'm not going straight to the steamer basket. I'm bringing over the yarn mop that had no acid in it yet, but now it's going to have plenty of acid in it to wipe things out before we run over to the next skein of yarn. And it's okay if there's a little bit of color left in there. The citric acid that I'm using here seems to be very big, and so yeah, there's some fallout that we're seeing, but I'm liking the direction that we're headed, so let's carry on. For the second skein, I went for the stroll fingering weight yarn, figuring we'd go from something worsted to something fingering weight, and I was still able to get really good coverage. It doesn't feel like I'm using that much of the powder, but maybe it would have been helpful for me to put a line on the jar to know exactly how high up it was. I am thankful that each of the dye colors looks different in the jars. That does make it super handy for me to deal with things. Now the third skein was the Chroma Twist Bulky. This yarn, it seems like the dye wasn't sticking that well. It sort of maybe slid off, or else I had a much lighter hand on it. But I still am just really liking the way that these colors are layering together. I'm really glad I brought in that turquoise. After finishing 2 more, I'm going to take the yarn over to the steamer basket. I'm getting better at speckling, like with a little bit, but it's amazing how much powder it looks like fell off of the yarn, and how much powder we see in the pan here too. So that's what the yarn mop is for. 300 grams is about all that really fits inside my steamer basket, and so that is why we're doing that now and taking a break before finishing the last 2. I am surprised that the citric acid is so chunky. That is definitely having an impact, I think, in how the colors are sinking into the yarn. Now I am using my aluminum pans. I may as well go ahead and set up the next one while we wait. I know that the citric acid is going to make little holes in these pans that I'm using. That is just a little inevitable, but it works well to carry the yarn to the stove. That way we don't have any fallout around my kitchen. But anyway, I set a timer for 30 minutes and then we'll head over to the stove. It has been 30 minutes. And who do we have here on top? Ooh. Oh, a lot more showed up. This is our, I think that is our Chroma Twist that did not look very pigmented at first. What on earth did I do to this yarn? Here it is. Our Stroll. You know I use citric acid. These colors are not giving sharp speckles. Not at all. It's possible there is way too much dye. Oh no, this is the Chroma Twist. The other one, okay, we're getting some more speckles here when I was a little lighter. I think I really need to try to have a light hand. The colorway is still really pretty, but definitely not necessarily super speckly. I'm gonna go with it. I had to move away a bit. There are more speckles when I have a lighter hand on the thicker yarn. The Stroll, I think I just went way too heavy-handed. So less is more because there's a lot of pigment in there, is what I need to remind myself. But it's good to have some examples of when I'm a little heavy-handed in case you're ordering one of these dyed to order, because I'm sure we'll have a lot of variation. I tried to take everything to heart as we went into the last 2 skeins of our prototype. The Swish DK, and then there is a worsted weight yarn from a company that no longer exists. I'm dyeing that as well because it's a fun yarn and I wanted to dye it. Now, this isn't a good video that is a great example of the difference you get on different colorways with different yarn bases. Because there's so much variability on how I'm using these shakers and how much dye is coming out each time, there's going to be some of the colorways that feel more splotched, and on that same base there could be some that feel more speckly. So that really, really does depend. And just to prove a point to myself, I did go ahead and grab one more skein of KnitPicks Stroll to go ahead and speckle on at the very end, to then go ahead and steam set everything. One thing as I was dyeing the next round, one epiphany that I had during this time lapse is that the difference between the bulky Chroma Twist and the other skeins was that after adding on the dye, I let it sit a little bit longer before I moved it and set it aside. That would give the dye a little bit more time to sink into the fibers, and so the citric acid to dissolve in those areas, and potentially could give a little bit more sharper, discrete speckles. Potentially. And so moving forward, if I'm gonna have to dye up a lot of this colorway, I think what I might do is have 2 catering steam pans set up at the same time. So I speckle on one, let it sit while I speckle the other, and kind of go back and forth. Just that way I'm not waiting that long in between. As we steam set this next batch before we wash it, there is definitely a difference in the dye texture. Like the orange and the blue are staying pretty well mixed up. The green, and I think I can show what's happening, the green dye powder is not staying sort of like mixed up. It's not really sticking to the citric acid powder. So sometimes when you speckle with it, you get the granules of citric acid. Other times you get some of the just fine powder coming out on its own. And the brown is doing that to a lesser extent, but I think you can see that there's some of this powder clumping to the very bottom. And don't forget, we added the citric acid in first. So it's falling, like over time, the powders are falling out and aren't staying coated to the citric acid. And so I really don't know what that's about, but I am going to work on finishing up this yarn mop that we've been using for all of these projects. And when the steamer basket is done, we'll remove the rest of the yarn and pop this in. It has been 30 minutes, and how are we looking? Still a bit splotched. Ooh, we're looking a little speckly here on this one. Big speckles. It's funny how some colors will stick to the, ooh, okay, this is the stroll. I definitely feel a little bit more speckling in here, even though the colors are still very blown out. I think it just happens to be these pigments in the Paradise Fibers acid dyes. But now I'm gonna steam set the yarn mop, which does feel quite different, for 30 minutes. At which point I'll remove it so it can cool completely, and then we'll start washing things. Let's wash this yarn. Now I'm starting in the pre-soak bath. So there is acid in here, but I'm not worried. I mean, ooh, we did get some good speckly fun in some of the areas. It was just this one, I'm like, hey, the stroll just doesn't feel that speckly compared to the others. But I think that the texture of the pigment, and I don't know if Paradise Fibers mills their own colors. And because I like the colors, but I think that of a lot of dyes that I've used, and I'm sure that there are some different textures of Dharmas too, but they seem to have a level of consistency in how they behave. But the citric acid I was using today was from Dharma and is coarser than the citric acid that I bought on Amazon from like, oh, and I just found the container from like Spice World or whatever. That seemed to have a finer milling to it. And so I don't know what it is about the colors. They gave us some differences there. But that is something to explore someday. But anyway, the yarn isn't bleeding. The colors are very fun, very muted fall. Not as intense as I think I was thinking, but I am enjoying the coverage a lot. So I'm gonna hang up the yarn to dry, wash the rest off camera. Here is all of the ready to ship yarn dyed in my Black Friday colorway, the 2025 Black Friday colorway. And we have a fair amount of variation in here. I think that the 3 skeins I did in the first batch, I was a lot more heavy-handed, and there is a lot more like color spread than we have in the ones that I did in that second batch. And I think that if you order a dyed to order colorway, it'll be somewhere in the middle of these. I'll be aiming for a little bit less coverage, but the heavy speckled ones are really beautiful as well. Just have to zoom in for a moment on the twill. This yarn is so bouncy, and as it dries, it sort of becomes even, like it's a little bit less stretched from the way it is when I dye it, and that makes all the speckles look really, really fun. I dyed 3 skeins of stroll in this video. The one that I did, I think the second skein I dyed overall, the 6th speckly skein I dyed overall, and then our yarn mop. And so if we look at the difference between these 2 skeins, you can see there's a huge difference. And that's because over here, I intentionally used a much lighter hand with my speckling. And you can see over here, rather than getting like a big splotch of the color, like we have here, we have more teeny tiny speckles. And yes, there's still some splotches over on the right, just like we have some speckles over on the left. But I guess this shows some of the variability that we have with this particular colorway. And so you could get something that is much more pigmented or a little bit less pigmented. That is going to be a little bit random. What you will know when you buy the Black Friday colorway is that you'll get something sort of in between. And if you order multiple, I'll try to have them feel as similar as I can to the best of my ability, especially if you're ordering from dyed to order. Then I can really try to dye them at the same time so they're as similar as possible. But these 2 would fade really well for a project. That would give a nice color story there. Now the yarn mop is quite different because not only do we have elements of all the colors, there are a handful of little speckles, but overall things are way more blended. And so if you pick the yarn mop, this is the type of colorway you will be receiving, whether it is this exact one that's ready to ship or one that I create using the same overall technique that I'm dyeing later on when I'm working on the dyed to order portion. But now I need to go twist everything up. All twisted up, we have our fingering weight stroll, Swish DK. This is the Dyer Supplier worsted, twill worsted, Chroma twist bulky, which is a yarn base that is now discontinued with KnitPicks, but I happen to have more, so I can dye more of that. And then we have our stroll yarn mop over there. I really have to say, I adore how all of these speckles turned out. If you really like this yarn, it is featured in an awesome Black Friday deal. If you buy a skein of this Black Friday colorway, you have the option to add on a mystery skein of yarn for just $10. Now that mystery skein of yarn could be anywhere from fingering weight to bulky. It could be superwash or non-superwash. It could be a tonal. It could be dyed with natural dyes. It could be speckled or wild. There's a variety of different types of colorways it could be. And I try to wrap up all the mystery skeins and then randomly put them into the packages. So I don't even know which one is going to which customer. But it's a fun way to get A, a colorway you know, and then B, a surprise that you can open up. There are a few other Black Friday specific deals. You can buy a project bag stuffed with at least 300 grams of mystery yarn. And for this one, you get to pick between fingering weight, DK weight, or worsted weight yarn. And the bag will also have lots of other fun extras that I have made or commissioned over the years. There are some heavily discounted stitch marker bundles. These will each have 6 stitch markers or charms that may have been featured in a past sampler, or sometimes there's some charms that have never been featured in anything at all. And so they're sort of randomly put into those bags. These charm bundles won't include anything that is coming up in the 2025 Hanukkah special though. Speaking of Hanukkah, the 2025 ChemKnits Hanukkah samplers are ready to ship, and so you can order yours now, and hopefully there's a chance it'll still arrive in time for Hanukkah, which starts on the 14th. Every night of Hanukkah, there will be a new yarn dyeing video, and mini skein of the yarn dyed in that video will be wrapped, labeled with the date, and included in your Hanukkah sampler. So that way you can watch the video, see how I dyed the yarn, and then touch, hold, swatch that yarn to see how different techniques might result in different types of colorways. The samplers will all have a handmade Hanukkah card signed by me, fun extras in some of the wrap bundles, and the whole thing is so much fun. So you can find more information about that in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. I'll have a link down in the video description. A lot of these Black Friday offerings are available while supplies last or until December 2nd. And speaking of that, there are a bunch of ready to ship yarns that are discounted up to 25% off as part of a Black Friday sale. And so that sale will also go through December 2nd. I know I mentioned at the beginning of the video that KnitPicks is having their Black Friday sale through December 1st. You can save 30% off with the coupon code that I'll put on the screen right here. And I actually made a gift guide with them featuring some of my favorite things, including my favorite bare yarn bases, some of my favorite notions and things like that. And I'll have that linked down in the video description. And again, I am a KnitPicks affiliate. I will earn commission if you make a purchase after clicking on one of my links. But this video is not sponsored. Everything that I used in this video I purchased with my own money. But now all I can say to you is thank you so much for watching and happy Thanksgiving.